Good morning, Year 6. It's Mr. Nicholson here for your daily English lesson. Really hope that you tuned in to your remote learning for English yesterday, because the sequence of lessons will really help you with today's lesson, and then you would have got the opportunity to actually learn a bit about evacuation in World War II and why it took place, and that will really help you with writing today's report. So the date is Tuesday the 23rd of February. Title of the lesson is Evacuation Report, and there will be Wilf for this lesson, so I'd like you to pause the video and write those titles into your English book, please, and then return to the video when you're ready. Okay, welcome back. So as I've just said, we're going to write a report about evacuation today. So we're going to do a piece of non-fiction writing, and hopefully you tuned in to yesterday's lesson. That will really help you, I think, with today's activity. So I've chosen making links for a learning power. As I said, it links to yesterday's lesson, and you might need to plan this out a little bit and really think about how you're going to write your report. But I will go through a Wilf with you later, and I will show you a Waggle as well, and that will really help you, I think, with this piece of writing. So this is exactly what we're doing. You are going to write a report about the evacuation in Britain at the start of World War II. So a report is something you would find in a history book. So we're doing some non-fiction writing today. It tells you all the factual information you need to know about a topic. So you're going to write about things that actually happened, things that are true. And you should present your information clearly, and it should be easy to read and easy to follow. So just imagine that you're doing a piece of writing that is going to go in a non-fiction book, in a history book, all about World War II. Okay, so here is a plan of how you could write a report, and you can obviously rewind the video and come back to this if you think it's going to help you. So a good idea would be to start with a title, and use a simple title that clearly tells the reader what the report is about. So our report is all about the evacuation in Britain at the start of World War II. And then you want to write your first sentence, which is so important because it's going to introduce what your report is all about. Don't forget to write your report in paragraphs. Okay, and what you might want to do is introduce the subject of each paragraph with a subheading. Don't panic if this is all a bit confusing for you, because as I said, I will show you a Waggle in a minute, and you will see how I've written my report with paragraphs and subheadings, and then things might click for you. Make sure that your writing is clear and doesn't confuse the reader with unnecessary information or opinions. Okay, so like I said before, it's a piece of non-fiction, so we can keep our writing quite simple. Make your writing formal and back up your explanations with lots of facts. Add comments and questions to interest the reader. And then once you've finished, it's always a good idea when you're writing a non-fiction piece of writing to check it through. Reread your report and just make sure that it's interesting, it's informative, and not too long. Don't forget, everybody, that you should just be spending an hour for an English lesson. So if your report is taking you too long, just stop and just check through what you've done. Okay, and then move on to the other lessons that you've got today. Okay, so here's a little bit of a plan. These are just notes about the evacuation process. This is certainly not a final piece of writing, but if you didn't tune into the lesson yesterday, you might not know much about evacuation, so these notes, these plans here might really help you with your piece of writing. And you might notice that I'm trying to answer 5 questions really. Who was involved in evacuation? What actually happened? Why did evacuation take place? Where did the children go, and when? Okay, so you might have heard of the 5 W's before: who, what, why, where, and when. And we're going to basically answer those questions in our report. So on 1st of September 1939, just before the actual war was started, before it was declared, children and vulnerable adults were evacuated from the large cities to the countryside because the government in Britain, knew that there was the potential for the Germans to start bombing the cities using their air force. Children were evacuated along with their teachers. Where children were very young, mums could go with them, and some disabled people were evacuated as well. Okay, what happened? So all of these people, including lots of children, travelled often as a school by train. And then when they got to their destination, a billeting officer would meet them, and like a parade would take place in somewhere like a church or a village hall, and children would be chosen by their new foster families and taken to their new homes. And some had good experiences and some had bad. And we talked a bit about that yesterday. Okay, so why did this happen? Well, as I just mentioned, the Germans, they thought that the Germans would bomb the big cities, the industrial heartlands in England, places like London and Bristol and Birmingham and Coventry, and Plymouth, of course, to gain maximum impact, and they thought, the Germans thought, it would really damage the morale of the people in Britain and would force Britain to surrender. So because of this threat, the countryside was deemed to be a much safer place, and that would be a place where children could be protected and help them maintain their innocence, because some of the sights that they would have been subjected to if they had stayed in the cities would have been truly awful. Okay, where? So, as I said, children were moved from the major cities to places in the countryside, places like the Peak District, Cumbria, Devon and Cornwall, Dartmoor, for example. Just places that were quieter, smaller. We call these places rural areas. And they would have stayed with different types of people. So they might have gone to posh families, to poor families, to farmers, where they would have, joined in with caring for animals and growing vegetables. It's a totally different world from the inner city life that they were used to. And when did this happen? So I think I said this in yesterday's lesson, that war was declared on the 3rd of September, and the evacuation was just a couple of days before that. So around 31st of August, 1st of September, the evacuation process was announced and started. They were just getting ready, they were getting their plans in place. And then the war was declared because Germany invaded Poland, which is a country in Eastern Europe, and the Prime Minister at the time, Neville Chamberlain, basically said, "I've had enough of Germany invading countries. If you invade Poland, we will declare war and we will fight against you." But Germany ignored that and invaded Poland anyway. This is very interesting, actually, because the start of World War II, it was very quiet in Great Britain. While both of the countries, Germany and Britain, were mobilizing their armies and building up their stocks of planes and tanks and weapons, no bombs were actually dropped in 1939. So what happened in many occasions was children were actually sent back home, and then when the Blitz, which you'll learn about more in your topic lessons with Miss Owen, when the bombs did start getting dropped on the cities in 1940, the children had to be evacuated again then. So actually there were kind of two evacuations. There was that one at the very, very beginning, while they were worried about what might happen, and then there was a re-evacuation when the bombs actually started getting dropped in the following year. Okay, so if you don't have any background information on your report today, you can use these plans, use these notes to help you with your report in today's lesson. So we're writing formally, and we've mentioned this before in our formal lessons when we did some grammar last term, is I want you to try and your very best to avoid contractions. So we're trying to keep it formal. So avoid words like didn't, you would use did not. Avoid words like wouldn't, you would write would not. Okay, so avoid the shortened down contractions and use the full words if you can. Okay, so I said at the start of the lesson that there is a WILF for today, and you can look at this at the end of the lesson when you finished your report, and you can make a decision about whether you've achieved bronze, silver or gold. So for bronze, I'd like you to write in paragraphs. I'd like you to answer those 5 W's, when, where, who, what and why. I'd like you to write in the past tense, in the third person. So obviously we're writing about something historical, we're writing about something that we weren't involved in. And I'd like you to try and use compound sentences with but, or, and write in that formal style that I've just been talking about. For silver, I'd also want you to write some really accurate descriptions. use some technical language, some words that would only be used in a World War II report. I'd like you to try and use some complex sentences with those subordinating conjunctions, maybe some brackets or some commas for parenthesis when you add in extra information. And for gold, I want you to include some really, really interesting details. Maybe you'll do a little bit of further research onto evacuation and include something really interesting. And I want you to have a go at using the colon or the semicolon that we've learned about previously in year 6. So you can always turn back to this, you can always rewind and come back to this at the end, and then you can have a look at your report, have a look at bronze, silver, gold, and make your decision. Okay, so hopefully that will help you with your report. And the other thing that I'd like to show you before you start writing that could be really helpful is a Waggle. So I'm just going to click on this icon here and bring my Waggle up. I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. And by all means use this to help you with yours. I've tried to include those features that I've just been talking about. So I'll just have a read through for you. And you can use this maybe to plan yours out and structure yours in a similar sort of way. So here we've got the title at the top, Evacuation During World War II. And here I've thought really carefully about my first sentence just to sum up what the report is about. When World War II was first announced on September the 1st, 1939, the government in Britain decided that all children from major cities should be evacuated to the safety of the countryside. Okay, and then as we go down my Waggle, you'll notice that I've got my subheadings where I'm asking those 5W questions that I've talked about before. If you're wondering why some of the words are in red, that's because these are actually words from the year 5 and 6 spelling list, so they're always good to practice. Okay, so I'll have a read through of this, and as I said, you've got it on your screen on your YouTube video, so you can use it to help you as well. Who was evacuated? Children, some teachers, disabled people and mothers with very young children whose husbands had gone to war were instructed and persuaded to evacuate through propaganda posters produced by the War Committee. So posters went up all around the cities trying to convince people to go to the countryside. What happened? To begin with, schools organised travel to local railway stations where dozens of steam trains were waiting to transport the children to the countryside. A teacher would often accompany the evacuees on the train so they felt safer. Each child would carry a small bag holding their belongings, a packet of biscuits from their parents, and their gas mask box which never left their side. Why were they evacuated? Children from British cities such as London, Manchester, Plymouth and Birmingham were on the evacuation list. They deemed to be German bombing targets and especially dangerous. The government agreed that the countryside was a safer place to protect the next generation and help them maintain their innocence. Where were children evacuated to? Many children were evacuated to quieter, more rural areas of Britain, including Wales, Brighton, Devon and Cornwall. The rural life was a stark contrast to what the children had been used to in the urban cities. Many saw things they had never seen before. Some children ended up working on farms, tending to animals they had never seen before, and growing vegetables. Whilst many children thrived and enjoyed this unique opportunity, others saw the rural people as old-fashioned and boring. Children had a variety of experiences in their host families. Some were treated well, whilst others were used for hard labour and punished frequently. When did evacuation occur? The evacuation process was announced over the wireless. This is just the name for the radios of the time. On the 31st of August 1939. Children were then evacuated immediately on the 1st of September, which was just a few days before Britain announced they were at war with Germany on the 3rd of September. This was the day that Germany invaded Poland. Before Christmas 1939, there were no bombs on British soil. Most children evacuated were sent back home again. However, by 1940, the Blitz was causing huge amounts of devastation. The children were once more evacuated to the safety of the countryside, where they stayed for the remainder of the war. Okay, so hope you enjoyed listening and reading my my report there about the evacuation process. As I said, if you want to go back and use this to help you, you can do. I'll just return to the smartboard now. So we've had a look at the WILF, we've had a look at what you need to do, we've had a look at some notes telling you what you should be writing about, and we've also had a look at a Waggle. So you've got all of those things now. So what I'd like you to do is start writing your report about the evacuation process, as if it is a page that could be in a history book. And then when you're finished, by all means send photos into your teachers. They can read your non-fiction through. I know we'd all be interested to see it. But rewind the video, go back to that WILF, and then you can tick off whether you think you've achieved bronze, silver or gold. Okay, well, I hope you enjoy writing your report about evacuation. Later on in the week we're going to stick to this topic of evacuation in World War II, but we're going to be writing some letters, which I think will be a really fun, a fun thing to write. Send photos through at the end of the English lesson this morning when you finish that, and your teachers would love to see your reports. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll be back online on YouTube on Thursday for your next English lesson. All the best. Stay safe everybody. Goodbye.